her 18-month-old child. The Trump administration, as we reported, is vowing to keep her out of the country. Secretary Pompeo spoke to that exact point. Daniel Brown served with the Department of Homeland Security during the Bush administration and managed cases just like this for the government. There's two issues here. There's the legal question as is she a U.S. citizen? Then there's the larger question about what to do with people like this. Everyone's calling her an ISIS bride. Jillian Turner made the very good point. This isn't someone who was kidnapped and then married off. This is someone who voluntarily, as an adult, went to Syria to join up with a group that was fighting against the United States and actively promoting the killing of U.S. citizens. Should we call her an ISIS bride, or should we just call her another terrorist?
That's a good question. I'm not here to defend her or any of the acts that she has taken in her life or the choices she's made. I think there's probably a good case to make that she may be prosecutable as a terrorist.
Well, it seems like her attorney's at least even saying, hey, it's okay if she comes over and is prosecuted anyway. He just wants her to be able to come home. There's this issue about, is she a U.S. citizen or not? Because she was born on U.S. soil. That's undisputed. But at the same time, she was the daughter of a diplomat from Yemen, may have been not a diplomat at the time. That's in question. Is this a winnable case for the attorney?
Potentially, yes. There seems to be they appear to have some evidence that he was not a diplomat or was not serving as a diplomat at the time that she was born. There was enough evidence, at least, for them to present originally to the Department of State a long time ago that caused the Department of State to grant her a passport and then renew that passport before she left for Syria.
All right, so this is her attorney on that point.
If Barack Obama, his State Department, didn't want her back in this country, they wouldn't strip her of that passport and visa, right?
President Trump declaring her a non-citizen, not only is he overreaching his own authority, but essentially he's giving her a free pass. He's saying the U.S. has no jurisdiction over her and letting her go.
This is an important point. Is there a way to strip someone of their U.S. citizenship, or say, even if you had it, you don't have it anymore, once you join up with a foreign terrorist group?
Under our current law, no. The Constitution guarantees if you're a citizen, you remain a citizen, and it can't be taken away. However, you can give it up voluntarily. And there are certain acts that the immigration statute recognizes as potentially expatriating, meaning you lose your, taking away your citizenship if you commit them voluntarily and with the intent to give up your citizenship in doing so. None of those acts probably fit her case in the statute.
Fascinating.
The statute talks about, for example, if you serve in the armed forces of a foreign state, but ISIS isn't a foreign state under the statute.
Fascinating. All right, well, that was her interview on ABC as she talked about some of her tweets that called for attacks on U.S. citizens. Now it's up to the courts to decide how this goes. Meanwhile, she's still overseas. Appreciate your time and your service, sir. Good to see you.
Thanks very much.
Thank
for
you.
having me.
Jillian?
Well, not everything that happens in Vegas stays there. Freak winter weather blanketing Sin City this week. We'll tell you where it's heading next.
Not normally associated with snow. Denver on the left. The winter weather swept through the Arizona desert as well as New Mexico, parts of Colorado. Road closures, school and government offices closed all across the Southwest.
So is more snow headed their way? Meteorologist Adam Klotz is live in the Fox Extreme Weather Center. Adam, tell us about it.
Well, Jillian, that winter system that you were just talking about now moving into the middle of the country, and it's going to bring a lot of different weather, actually tornadoes across the south, a blizzard to portions of the Plain States. So this is a big, large, major system. We're going to be talking about some spring-like weather, across the southeast, from Memphis stretching down across Tennessee. These are all areas where there's a moderate risk and even in some areas probably a likely risk of seeing some tornadic activity late this afternoon into the overnight hours. And then it's a much larger area if you talk about around that general system where we're seeing a huge area where you could see flooding from this. So from Mississippi, Alabama, North Georgia, stretching up across Tennessee into Kentucky, getting the Ohio River Basin, and then it's stretching farther off towards the east. All areas where this is going to bring flooding. On the backside of this system, where the air is a little bit colder, we're talking about blizzards. That means the visibility is going to be down to a quarter mile for 3 hours. Winds up to 35 miles an hour. Just a ton of snow with this system. Guys, this is going to be a major winter system. And again, this happens tonight, running into early tomorrow before it works its way to the East Coast. Won't be as bad for folks in the east, though.
So it is not staying in Vegas, as all things that happen there are
It started there, didn't
Yeah.
end there.
Thanks, Adam.
All right. Well, some new breaking news from John Bolton out of Venezuela. We're hearing from those soldiers who defected over to Juan Guaido's side. The team
aimed at blocking the emergency declaration. Meanwhile, President Trump, well, he is doubling down on his calls for a wall on the southern border with Mexico. That as the Pentagon announces it will deploy an additional 1,000 troops there to install barbed wire all along the existing border fences.
We've apprehended more people than we have in many, many years. Apprehended, meaning we've gotten, with the wall, we wouldn't even have to apprehend them if we had the proper structure. It's costing us a lot of money with the military.
We have live Fox News team coverage with Garrett Tinney following the latest political developments from our nation's capital. But we begin with Jeff Paul, live from our West Coast Bureau with more on what's happening at the border. Jeff.
Arthel Shanahan and Dunford are at the border today working to understand where the gaps in protection are and what DHS specifically needs. So far, they visited a National Guard mission that's in New Mexico, just across from Texas. They're being briefed and checking out Border Patrol's mobile surveillance vehicles, AT'd and prioritized for construction by DHS. Something we should point out, in a letter to the Department of Defense, DHS requested, quote, fencing, while the DOD uses the term barrier. None of the officials used the term wall. Arthel.
All right, Jeff Paul, thank you very much for that update. Eric.
Arthel, meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, House Democrats are moving forward with their resolution to try and block President Trump's national emergency declaration. Speaker Nancy Pelosi saying she vows to fight the president's action to try and get funding for his border wall.
We have a constitutional responsibility to protect and defend the Constitution. To do anything less than overturn this action by the president, we would be delinquent in our duties as those who take an oath to protect the Constitution.
Garrett Tinney now has the latest on their efforts.
Democrats are vowing to fight the president on his emergency declaration in Congress, in the courts, and through public opinion. On Tuesday, the House will vote on what's known as a resolution of disapproval, which would allow Congress to end the national emergency status. Democrats and a number of Republicans argue there is no real emergency that justifies the president's declaration. On Friday in Laredo, Texas, Speaker Nancy Pelosi said it was Congress's constitutional responsibility to block it.
We will be fighting him on this usurping of power, of violating the Constitution of the United States in the Congress, in the courts, and with the American people.
The legislation is expected to sail through the Democratic-controlled House. In the Senate, it's expected to be a bit more of a challenge. Democrats need at least 4 Republicans to support it. So far, only Susan Collins of Maine has said she will vote for it, but a handful of others have also expressed concern over the precedent this use of emergency powers could set. In the Oval Office Friday, President Trump was confident, though, that Republicans will support his move, and even if they don't, he said there is no way that he would sign it.
I think they'll stick, yeah. Everybody knows we need border security. We need a wall. I think it's a very bad subject for the Democrats. We need a wall. On the wall?
Yes.
Will I veto it? 100%. 100%. And I don't think it survives a veto. We have too many smart people that want border security, so I can't imagine it could survive a veto, but I will veto it, yes.
That would be the first veto of President Trump's administration, and there is not a lot of optimism that Congress can muster up the 2/3 votes necessary to override it. But to be clear, this is just the first of many fights ahead over this emergency declaration. Eric?
All right, Garrett, thanks so much. Arthel?
Eric, thank you. And for more on this, we're going to bring in Bob Cusack. He's the editor-in-chief of The Hill. So here we have, Bob, the president saying that he will 100% veto any measures that manage to pass the House and Senate, of course, to block his emergency declaration. Does the Constitution allow that? What kind of precedent would that set? And although they can't stop the president, would Republican leaders support a presidential veto?
Well, those are very tough questions. I mean, the critics say this should be blocked. It's unlawful. Without a doubt, Arthel, this is going to pass the House. The Senate, it's really about 60-40. I think there will be enough defections at this point, but the White House, I'm sure, is going to be blitzing Capitol Hill this week and making sure that there are not enough Republican defections, because President Trump will veto this. He doesn't want to. And the fact that he has to veto or may have to veto that actually could hurt him in the court. So it's a better situation if Republicans stick with the president. But there are a number of Republicans. Senator Graham said on Fox yesterday he expects a handful of Republican defections. That would mean it would pass the Senate. But the president is right. There is no chance, I think, that he would be overridden, that Congress would override his veto. So where do we look? It's going to be settled in the courts.
Well, and that, of course, extends the timing of everything. But meanwhile, let's talk about this. During the flight to El Paso today, Acting Defense Secretary Patrick Shanahan and General Dunford, Chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff, briefing reporters about the mission there and the Defense Department's role in border security. And I want to go over some of that briefing again. Jeff Paul touched on it, but here it is again. Regarding that briefing, the $3.6 billion from the Military Construction Fund, Secretary Shannon will determine which DHS, Department of Homeland Security, projects are necessary for the use of the armed forces, and therefore how much of that money is spent. Noting that the Secretary will not use all $3.6 billion if he doesn't deem it necessary. Secretary Shannon looking to assess where are the needs for the DHS and gaps, and whether or how military construction is necessary to support Department of Homeland Security. So, Bob, with such a detailed mission at hand, does that signal that the acting defense secretary is focused on border security and not politics?
Well, yes. I mean, certainly, though, he does report to the president, and that's what Democrats are going to be highlighting, is that you're taking away money from defense. The White House needs to do more of this to show, hey, we need some of this here, and whether it's a barrier or whether it's technology. And certainly Democrats do support some technologies. It's just the politics of the wall, Arthel, that is really blocking this and has led to a shutdown and led to continued fights that are going to continue in the years ahead, really.
Well, Bob, can you stay there for us, because I want to...
Supposed to go to the desperate, starving Venezuelans, and Maduro has urged his soldiers to block the aid, and he states, and there have been clashes in Uriña, Venezuela, on the border of Colombia, protesters lighting a public bus on fire as Maduro's forces have fired tear gas canisters. What you're looking at right now is Guaido, a video that he tweeted with presumably a Venezuelan general who is pledging his allegiance to Guaido. This is significant. The President of the United States, the Vice President, and John Bolton have all tweeted their support of the opposition today. Bolton highlighting and urging that the Venezuelan military please side with the opposition today. In fact, Guaido released this video in which he spoke on Twitter, and he urged Chavistas, those who are supporters of Maduro. He said this, quote, "This is a struggle for all Venezuelans. The time is now. We ask that all Chavistas side with the Constitution. Today, Venezuela needs you. Venezuela needs all of us united. We call on you to defend and protect our people. Friends, Chavistas, the time is now." So, Eric, bottom line is the opposition says the first humanitarian trucks have made their way into Venezuela through Colombia and Brazil. We cannot independently confirm this. There are some reports from the Associated Press that the trucks are stuck on the border, but you can imagine there is confusion right now with tense standoffs between the opposition forces and civilians, as well as Maduro's military right now. So we will continue to follow the fluid situation.
Yeah, it certainly would be a good sign if indeed those trucks have been able to break through. Brian, thank you. Arthel?
And for more on this, we're going to bring back Bob Cusack. He's the editor-in-chief of The Hill. So you saw the report laid out there by Brian Yennett. So, Bob, if the Venezuelan soldiers continue to support Nicolas Maduro and block aid with 10 counts of felony sexual abuse, the 52-year-old singer, whose real name is Robert Sylvester Kelly, has been in police custody since turning himself in late last night. Now, prosecutors say Kelly abused 4 victims, 3 of whom were minors. The incidents allegedly took place between 1998 and 2010. Kelly's lawyer is accusing the women of lying and trying to exploit the singer's fame. Right now, you see there on the screen the Cook County State Attorney speaking now. Let's take a listen.
The victim in this case. The third victim, LC, was involved in an incident which occurred on February 18, 2003. A grand jury returned an indictment on 1 count of aggravated criminal sexual abuse based on the transmission of semen by Robert Kelly upon any part of the body of the victim for the purpose of sexual gratification during the course of the underlying forcible felony of aggravated criminal sexual assault attempt. On February 18, 2003, at 865 North Larrabee Street in Chicago, Cook County, Illinois, the victim was 24 years old and worked as a hairdresser for Robert Kelly. While the victim was waiting alone in a room for Robert Kelly to come in so she could braid his hair, Robert Kelly entered saying he didn't want his hair braided that day. He wanted his head massaged. At the time he said this, Robert Kelly had his pants pulled down and he was pointing to his penis. Robert Kelly grabbed the victim by the head and tried to force her mouth onto his exposed penis, but the victim was able to resist. Robert Kelly then masturbated and ejaculated onto the victim and spit in her face several times. The shirt the victim was wearing was submitted to the Illinois State Police for DNA testing, and the semen was identified.
Okay, let's break away there. As you can see, Kimberly Fox, Cook County prosecutor, laying out some very explicit, detailed charges against R. Kelly, whose bond has been set at $1 million. We will follow the story. As you know, R. Kelly is charged with 10 counts of felony sexual abuse. We'll follow the story and bring you the latest when warranted. And this is another Fox News alert. President Trump says he's optimistic about reaching a trade deal with China after 2 weeks of talks. Mr. Trump says he may delay the March 1st deadline and expects to meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping next month to complete an agreement.
He's proclaimed his innocence totally, but I'm very surprised to see it.
Have you spoken to Bill Barr about the release of the Mueller report?
Their children speak fluent Chinese, even though they're very young. They were taught.
Ellison Barber joins us live now from the White House with the very latest. Ellison.
Hi, Arthel. China, according to the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, committed to buying an additional 10 million metric tons of U.S. soybeans during that meeting in the Oval Office yesterday. In a tweet, Secretary Sonny Perdue said that it is proof the strategy is working. He called it a show of good faith by the Chinese, one that is an indication of more good news to come. President Trump expressed optimism at yesterday's meeting, but at the same time, the U.S. trade rep, Robert Lighthizer, said that there are still a few very big hurdles when it comes to a U.S.-China trade deal. Negotiators are reportedly working on 6 areas of a broad agreement: forced technology transfer and cyber theft, intellectual property rights, services, currency, agriculture, and non-tariff barriers to trade. Initially, those 6 areas were said to be memorandums of understanding, but Lighthizer changed the terminology at yesterday's Oval Office meeting after President Trump pushed back on MOUs. Mr. Trump said MOUs do not mean anything. His trade rep disagreed, but then said they'd now go with the term trade agreement instead. Without a deal by March 1st, tariffs on roughly $200 billion worth of Chinese products are set to go from 10% to 25%.
I think that and you can tell this to President Xi, I think that if I see progress being made, substantial progress being made, it would not be inappropriate to extend that deadline, keep it at 10% instead of raising it to 25%. And I would be inclined to doing that. We're covering things that we didn't even know we'd be covering. We're going very deep into the trade and covering items that a lot of people wanted to cover and nobody thought would ever get to. But we have a one-time shot at making a great deal for both countries. And so we are going to give it.
Chinese President Xi Jinping is reportedly going to perhaps meet with President Trump in March. President Trump said during that meeting yesterday that he could meet with the Chinese president in March at his place in Mar-a-Lago. Arthel?
Okay, optimism is a good thing. Ellison Barber, thank you very much.
Elected.
So, what can we expect with the second meeting? Joining us now is Sung Yoon Lee. He's a professor of Korean Studies for the Kim Koo of Korea Foundation, and he's at the Fletcher School of Diplomacy at Tufts University in Boston. Professor, thank you for joining us. What credible steps do you think Kim could offer, if any, at the meeting this next week?
You know, the North Korean leadership is such a strange, bizarre amalgamation of medieval mores and buffoonish bellicosity, it's very easy to underestimate them. And I would say every successive U.S. administration, going all the way back to the Harry Truman administration, has seriously patronized, underestimated the North Korean adversary. If you look at the concessions that Kim has given so far, Kim has released U.S. detainees who never should have been in prison in the first place. He has decommissioned an old nuclear test site after 6 underground tests that he does not need anymore. He has said that he's amenable to holding off on nuclear and missile tests, which are activities prohibited under more than 10 UN Security Council resolutions. And in return for that, he has bought himself already much time and money in the form of non-sanctions enforcement and lax sanctions enforcement. He has bought himself a lot of money and time with which to further develop his nuclear and ballistic missile capabilities. So any illusory concession President Trump should reject and demand on Kim to take meaningful steps, such as release political prisoners, stop counterfeiting U.S. currency, abide by the norms of international community as an aid recipient nation, allowing for monitoring and transparency, stop money laundering, release all political prisoners, not only North Koreans, but also foreign detainees unlawfully abducted, change its political system, become a free and open society, denuclearize as stipulated in various UN Security Council resolutions, and so on. And I know this is a high bar to meet at once, and it won't happen, but these are terms stipulated in the U.S. 2016 U.S. sanctions law, sections 401 and 402, and President Trump should argue, I am authorized, I am obliged to continue to enforce sanctions against your regime unless you make these substantive change.
So what you're saying is basically Kim has...
to the North Korean regime.
So when we talk about, quote, denuclearization, the two definitions, the U.S. point of view is that Kim gives up his nuclear program, which you don't see very likely. And his definition is all U.S. assets, military assets, and 28,500 troops out of South Korea so that he can eventually basically try and take over?
You know, even on the propaganda front, we see the Kims are very adept. We have been using this strange phrase, denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, instead of saying of North Korea. There are no nukes in the South, we know, for over a decade now, since 2005. And now North Korea has come out and said, you agree to this. And you know we mean by denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula the end of extended U.S. nuclear deterrent.
With Russia.
I won a race. You know why I won the race? Because I was a better candidate than she was, and had nothing to do with Russia. And everybody knows it's a hoax. It's one of the greatest hoaxes ever perpetrated on this country. So I look forward to seeing the report. If it's an honest report, it will say that. If it's not an honest report, it won't.
Let's bring in Boyd Matheson. He's the GOP strategist and former chief of staff for Republican Senator Mike Lee, and Robin Byro. I think I have it right? Yes, Democratic strategist and former Obama campaign regional field director. Before I want to ask you, get your reaction to what you just heard President Trump say there in that soundbite. Boyd, I'll start with you. President Trump saying, hey, listen, he will sanction this as a real honest report if it does not confirm or insinuate that there was any collusion. If that report by Mr. Mueller says there is collusion, then it's a bogus report. What do you think about that?
Yeah, you know, I think everyone's just got to step back a little bit. One, Mr. Mueller has not produced the report yet, and so whether it's saying it's right or wrong, or whether more of it needs to be made public or not, those are things that just haven't even happened yet. Mr. Mueller's gotten really good at kind of the fake close. He gets a few news cycles out of it, I think. But I think the more important thing is for us to look at what is the real issue. And the president is right. The issue is, was there collusion or not during the 2016 campaign? If there's not, then let's move forward and move on. And if there is, then let's get into the substance of that, and let's have that conversation.
Robin, how do you see it, the president, his soundbite there that we just played?
You know, I want to manage the expectations of my colleagues on the left. I've never really thought that President Trump might be implicated in this directly himself. The original appointment orders, I want to go back to that because those specified that this was an investigation into Russia's attempt to meddle in our democracy. So I'm anxious to see, thank God this is coming to an end, for one thing. But I think Americans deserve to know the truth of that. I just want, of course, we can all agree that any portions that may be compromise our national security need to be redacted. But to regain the public trust, let's just get some transparency and see exactly how far this went with Russia.
So, Boyd, what do you think when the time does come? How much do you think will be made public? How much of that information, like Robin says, that doesn't breach national security should be made public? And do you think Attorney General Barr will lean towards the law, or will politics determine what Mr. Barr shares from the Mueller report?
Well, I think Attorney General Barr was very clear in his confirmation hearings that he wanted to be as transparent as was possible under the law. And I think that's a good thing. We do need transparency. That's what creates trust in this country. You also raised the point that once it is out, you know, what happens, how much is out there. We have this real problem in our country right now called instant certainty. And the moment anything happens, we suddenly have everyone proclaiming what it is, what it means, and what should come next. And we've seen even just this week in the Jussie Smollett case of just that instant certainty, things are not always as they appear to be. There's going to be a lot to unpack in the Mueller report, and it will be a lot of news cycles, but we need to be careful. Instant certainty undermines trust, and it prevents us from actually getting to the truth. And the American people are very weary and very leery of big government right now. And so people do need to be careful. Robin is absolutely right in cautioning those on the left. And I'm going to do the same and caution those on the right to not spike the football, or for the left to go crazy in terms of demanding more and more and really becoming obsessed with it. There's a better way to do this, but instant uncertainty, asking questions, listening, being open to new information and ideas is really what we got to get back to in the country.
And Robin, you know, if what Attorney General Barr releases does not satisfy the Democrats, how far should they go with subpoenas and measures to get the information released?
Arthel, you already know that they're going to take this to the limit if they're not satisfied, because the issue here is protecting and restoring the Americans, the public trust in our system of democracy. That's important. You know, I'm a veteran. I pledged my life to defend this country against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and we just have to make sure that we know the full extent to which our foreign adversaries tried to do this, and Americans deserve to know the truth.
So, Boyd, is there such a, you know, Robin just said that he thinks the Democrats will push it to the limit. Could there be a point where it becomes too much and it backfires on the Democrats?
Yeah, there is actually a point where that does happen, and they should learn from the mistakes the Republicans made during the Obama administration for living proof of that. But again, the idea is that we need to get back to everyone doing what their job actually is. Too often, we're already seeing things where the president's saying, hey, this is going to go to the courts, and this is going to go here. We keep waiting for, you know, people to swoop in and solve problems, and that's just not the way it's designed to be. And so open transparency is a big part of this process. I'm sure there will be a debate on what transparency is, but as Robin said, this really does get down to, let's look at what's in the best interest of the country, not political points, not fundraising, not 2020 candidates for election. Let's do this based on truth. Let's build trust, and let's get it back to the American people where it really belongs.
Well, I saw that Robin is shaking his head, so it seems that you both agree on that point, so we'll leave it there. Robin Byro, Boyd Matheson, thank you very much.
Thanks, Arthur.
Kraft was videotaped twice, engaging in illicit activity, they say, during a sting operation of human trafficking at area spas. About 200 other arrest warrants have been issued in this wide-ranging case. Reports say the names range from former law enforcement officials to a Wall Street billionaire. Jackie Heinrich has more on these latest developments. Hi, Jackie.
Hi, Eric. Florida police said they were as stunned as anyone to see Kraft among the hundreds accused of soliciting sex in a prostitution ring. The Patriots franchise owner is one of 25 people that have been charged so far. The investigation took more than 8 months. As part of the sting, police planted cameras inside the spas. They said the women were working in sexual servitude, and patrons paid between $59 and $79 for services. Kraft is accused of paying for sex at the Orchids of Asia spa on 2 occasions last month, and police say they have it all on camera.
The video that we obtained, it shows the act that took place. On every gentleman that you have a list of, the act that took place is recorded on that video.
Kraft faces 2 charges, both second-degree misdemeanors, so it's unlikely that Kraft will be formally arrested. In Palm Beach County, misdemeanors are served through a summons in the mail, and your lawyer can appear in court on your behalf. As far as jail time goes, each of those counts carries a maximum sentence of 60 days behind bars, but it's usually the spa owners that face the maximum penalty. Patrons most often are sentenced to community service, especially first-time offenders. Kraft denies the allegations, and the NFL said it's monitoring developments, but the league policy says that franchise owners are held to a higher standard of personal conduct. Meantime,
Fox Extreme Weather Center, and Adam, I guess the snow, even in Scottsdale, wasn't stopping the golfers. They were out hitting the links.
That doesn't surprise me. If you got to golf, you got to golf. But that weather that we're talking about now sweeping across the country, going to cause a lot of problems for different areas of the country. And depending on where you are, what you see is going to be a bit different. Everything across the southeast, major flooding, perhaps some tornadoes later this evening getting into the overnight hours. And then the backside of this system, still cold enough air that this is going to be a big winter storm. But I'm going to begin with what's happening in the southeast. This is our severe threat through tonight, and a lot of this goes into the overnight hours. So you're getting into portions of Memphis, stretching down into northern Mississippi, all an area where you could see severe thunderstorms. But even more than that, there's enough instability there that a lot of this could turn into tornadic activity. So everything you're looking at here in the red area, and it's, again, northern Mississippi mostly, a high potential of some tornado threats this evening running into early tomorrow morning. That's going to be one we have to pay very close attention to. Outside of that area, a much larger area than that, we're talking about flooding stretching across a huge region here, the Ohio River Valley, and then stretching south, northern Georgia, northern Alabama. All areas to pay attention to. If you're on the backside of this, everything in the red, that is a blizzard warning. So you're running into the upper plains, the upper Midwest. That means visibility down to a quarter of a mile. The winds at 35 miles an hour. It is going to be a whiteout as far as very heavy snow goes. In some of these areas, you can kind of watch it on the move here. It's a thin line, but spots getting up to 18 to 24 inches. This could be a major snow right in this particular region as we kind of watch it move. Hour by hour forecast, and I'll leave you with this, kind of see it on the move. It happens overnight tonight. All of this moving to the East Coast by tomorrow.
I think it's possible. I think that's why we started our investigation, and I'm really anxious to see where Director Mueller concludes that.
All this amid new reports that the Mueller probe is wrapping up. And as former Trump fixer Michael Cohen prepares to testify on Capitol Hill next week. Let's bring in James Trusty. He is a former Justice Department prosecutor. Welcome. Good to have you here again. So let's start with the McCabe revelation that he and the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein talked about the idea of invoking the 25th Amendment to replace President Trump. Have you ever heard of anything like that before?
No, it's pretty outlandish, and I feel that way really for two different reasons. One is McCabe and one is Rosenstein. McCabe has serious credibility problems. The Inspector General found that he lied on multiple occasions, including lying about the last conversation with the Inspector General. He's on a book tour. He's got a criminal referral out there, and he's got a lot of axes to grind as he goes on these softball interviews. On the other side of it, I know Rod Rosenstein. I know him to be a career prosecutor, a guy who's very stand-up and ethical, and also very intelligent about the Constitution. I can't imagine for a moment that Rod would ever think the 25th Amendment was remotely in play. It's about disability, not dislike. And so I think on both ends of the spectrum, there's some serious credibility questions surrounding Mr. McCabe's allegations.
So Rosenstein has said he was in no position to be able to invoke the 25th Amendment. Of course, he wasn't, but he doesn't deny that he may have he raised the issue. So, I mean, maybe this was just the turmoil of the time, the kind of chaos after the Comey firing that might have come up.
Yeah, I don't think it would have come up in a straight-laced way. I think it's possible that Rosenstein was sarcastic, dismissive of the notion. But you also have to remember, I think, when DOJ issues these denials, they're being very careful not to expose fuller, more detailed investigative conversations. So I think he's kind of hitting back with one arm behind his back rather than being able to give a full-throated response to what McCabe is saying.
So you'd like to see him testify, as Lindsey Graham has said to the Senate Judiciary Committee about all this with Rod Rosenstein? Would that could be helpful, I suppose?
I think it would be helpful. I don't know if I wish that on any of my friends or my enemies, but the reality is I think Rod will hold up very well in front of Congress when it comes to this type of questioning. I don't think he has anything to hide. And I think there's a big comparison, a stark difference between him and McCabe when it comes to how they'll perform.
Just in terms of the Constitution, if you are somebody in the administration, and you think the President of the United States is in some ways compromised, isn't your obligation to presumably resign and to then state why you're resigning? And under the Constitution, the remedy for something like that is impeachment. Go to Congress and say, look, this president is compromised, can't fulfill his duties, and I'm willing to testify to that effect.
Right. I think that's the honorable kind of law enforcement approach to it, and that's what seems so out of place when you talk about McCabe and Comey, you know, going on The View, doing book tours. It's just a different politicized world at the FBI top reaches recently, and I think even a lot of rank-and-file FBI agents that I know are welcoming the change and the scrutiny and want to see kind of a different attitude from the top of their organization than they're seeing from these guys.
All right, so let's talk about where Robert Mueller stands right now. A lot of talk, media reports that somehow this is going to be over soon, and he'll issue a report or tell new Attorney General Bill Barr that he is wrapping up. Where do you see this at the present moment?
Well, I think there's a lot of reason to think that it is at the finish line. I mean, part of it goes back to the fact that